For the love of Chicago, my name is Tom Barnes, enjoying the sights and beautiful sounds of the Hyde Park neighborhood. There's a fun saying that goes, "From whom the bells toll." Enjoy it. We're going to get to Paul DeRica about the history of Hyde Park in 1 second, but first, I got a story to tell you. This part of the city truly has global impact. Did you know that the University of Chicago is home to improv comedy? I just watched the John Candy documentary, and he even referenced Second City's origins here in Chicago at the University of Chicago. Paul, tell us more.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about Hyde Park. When I moved to Chicago almost 20 years ago, Hyde Park is where I lived originally, and it's a great neighborhood. I mean, nowhere else in the city of Chicago can you find a place that hosted a World's Fair, that has a world-renowned university, that gave us the city's first black mayor and the country's first black president, and where you find the birthplace of the atomic age and improv comedy.
I didn't know about improv comedy. That's a fun fact.
That's right. So on 55th Street, just a little bit to the west of where you'll find Jimmy's Woodlawn Tap today, there stood a tavern called the Compass Tavern. And it was there in 1955 that a lot of students affiliated with the University of Chicago got together and created improv as we know it today. They called themselves the Compass Players, but later they moved to the north side and renamed themselves Second City.
Speaking of Jimmy's, tell us a little bit more about Jimmy's and the Woodlawn Tap, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy's Woodlawn Tap, it's called Jimmy's for those who live in the neighborhood after the longtime owner, but the Woodlawn Tap is its official name. It's been there since the early 1940s. And lots of different people connected to the university, but also neighborhood people as well have come there over the years. Roger Ebert apparently thought it had one of the best cheeseburgers in the city back when he was a graduate student at the university in the English department.
So I mentioned a little bit about the World's Fair that happened right here in Hyde Park. Paul, tell us a little bit more about the impact of that World's Fair.
Well, like a lot of other neighborhoods in Chicago, Hyde Park actually began as its own independent village and later township, and it wasn't until 1889 that it was annexed to the city of Chicago. And then in 1893, it hosts the World's Columbian Exposition, and that leads to a lot of growth in the area. Now, the first Chicago World's Fair was immense. It covered over 600 acres in Jackson Park. There were over 200 structures, and about a little over 27 million people attended the World's Fair. To give you perspective on that, in 1893, the population of the United States was around 60 million.
Another fun neighborhood within the Hyde Park neighborhood is the Golden Rectangle neighborhood. And I'm walking through it right now, and you can see Chicago pride on display on these beautiful houses along Dorchester Avenue.
Well, what makes Hyde Park great is that it's got this beautiful proximity to the lake. So I've just mentioned Jackson Park, where the World's Columbian Exposition was hosted. And you can walk from there out to the lakefront. But it also has a beautiful park to the west as well, Washington Park, and they're connected by this stretch of green space called the Midway Plaisance, where today in winter you can go ice skating, but back in 1893 during the summer, that's where you would have found the very first Ferris wheel.
And that also now has significance because one of those parks will be home to the Obama Library.
That's correct. So you've got a lot of good and great cultural attractions down in the Hyde Park neighborhood. One of the buildings that had been at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition is today's Museum of Science and Industry. You also have the Obama Center, which will be opening in Jackson Park as well. You've got multiple Frank Lloyd Wright houses. Many people know about the Roby House, but actually some of the first houses that he designed you can find in Hyde Park as well.
So if you ever find yourself walking or driving through Jackson Park, you might have seen that giant, beautiful gold statue. But what is it? Paul, help us out.
The Statue of the Republic is a replica of the original that was designed by Daniel Chester Friends. It was put there on that site to mark the 25th anniversary of the World's Columbian Exposition. It actually stands on the site where the administration building was at the World's Fair. So the original in 1893, like much of the fair, was just built to be temporary. And what you see today, as I said, was a replica, but it stands about 25 feet. The original Statue of the Republic was 64 feet tall.
Oh my gosh. That was just, you probably
Immense,
see that
huge.
from all over.
Right.
Which is the point.
Well, the very first Ferris wheel was 264 feet tall. So if you were to go down today to the Midway Plaisance and look at the Logan Center for the Arts, which is on the south side of the Plaisance. It's where all the performing arts programs and visual arts programs for the university are based. That's about 11 stories and it's about 127 feet. So imagine stacking two of those on top of each other and you're still not quite to the top of the first Ferris wheel.
And that would kind of dwarf what we see down at Navy Pier.
That's right, yes.
Oh my goodness.
For the longest time, the very first Ferris wheel from 1893 was the largest ever to be constructed, although today now, across the globe, there are ones that are bigger.
So there's a lot of fun facts about Hyde Park, including the reference to Where's the Beef. Paul?
Don't know how many people remember the Where's the Beef commercials.
Where's the beef?
Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
Where's the beef?
Well, the woman who says that was actually a manicurist who lived in the Hyde Park neighborhood.
No kidding.
Yeah, before she turned to acting.
All right, the debate goes on, but I have my friend Paul to clear up. Did President Obama live in Hyde Park or Kenwood, or are they one and the same?
Obama has, certainly a very strong connection relationship to Hyde Park. So he taught at the University of Chicago Law School. He exchanged his first kiss with Michelle in the Hyde Park neighborhood. In fact, there's even a little historical marker at the site on 53rd Street.
So at the corner of Dorchester and 53rd, you have the famous Kissing Rock. Take a look at it right there. It says, on our first date, I treated her to the finest ice cream Baskin-Robbins had to offer, our dinner table doubling as the curb. I kissed her and it tasted like chocolate. An interview with O Magazine from 2007, right here, the corner of Dorchester and 53rd Street, here in the bustling downtown area that is Hyde Park.
There's a cafeteria-style restaurant that he loved, but actually he and Michelle lived just over the northern boundary of Hyde Park and Kenwood.
And you just mentioned one of the big tenets of Hyde Park that's been a part of that fabric of that community for years is the University of Chicago.
That's right. So the University of Chicago opened its doors on October 1st, 1892. Its primary benefactor was John D. Rockefeller. It originally was formed by Baptists, but today it's a non-denominational institution and is one of the premier research institutions in the world.
Was it just convenience that it opened up the year before the World's Fair?
Well, they kind of knew the fair was already going to be at that site. And it was also, there was Marshall Field donated some land and sold some land to the university's founders, so it was an ideal place for them to build it. It wasn't that far away from what is today the Loop. When Hyde Park was established, one thing that really kind of helped it grow as a suburb is that the Illinois Central Railroad ran directly to the east of it, and so it made for a quick commute into the city.
And there is a line that still runs today. Is that the electric line?
The Metro Electric actually runs along the original route of the Illinois Central, which has been taking people into the Loop since the 1850s.
All right, so when you drive through Hyde Park today, what do you see, Paul?
Hyde Park today, is known for being the home of the University of Chicago. It's being known as the place where Barack Obama got his start in politics. And it's also, known as being one of the most vibrant lakefront communities in the city.
And the architecture, anything specific about the architecture down that way?
Hyde Park is a beautiful neighborhood. As I mentioned, you'll find the Roby House down there, but you'll find some other early Frank Lloyd Wright houses in Hyde Park. But throughout the neighborhood, you'll see some of the best examples of 2-flats and 3-flats that exist.
There's another fun fact about Hyde Park, and that is the home to the first African-American mayor in Chicago's history, Harold Washington. Paul, tell us a little bit about that.
Harold Washington lived in Hyde Park. He was there, when he became mayor of the city of Chicago. And where he lived is adjacent to a park that's now named in his memory. And it was also home to a colony of tropical birds. They're called monk parakeets, and they're lime green. And somehow they've been able to survive and thrive in this community, even through Chicago winters. And Washington really loved those birds and kind of, took a lesson from their resiliency. And so now there's a beautiful mural under the Metro tracks that shows Harold Washington and a monk parakeet.
All right, so one of my favorite spots in all of Chicago is Promontory Point here in Burnham Park, and the view here is second to none. A lot of people don't even know that this part of the city exists, but there have been some high-profile weddings here to everyday Chicagoans that use this space to get married in this particular building right here, because the views are spectacular. We're looking north towards 55th Street. And before we get there, I should tell you, on the other side, there are like fire pits that you can use. One of the very few spots in all of the city of Chicago where you can use fire pits right on Lake Michigan. And here is the view I was talking about. Like I said, you're looking north from 55th Street to downtown off of Promontory Point. Look at that beautiful architecture. Some of the things that you will see here at the University of Chicago's campus here in Hyde Park. I have my friend Chris to tell me more about it. Chris, tell us a little bit about the campus.
Yeah, it's an incredible institution located in an incredible city. We joke that it's kind of a global university, and it is. It's one of the top-ranked universities in the world, and has long understood itself as being kind of on par with or in partnership with universities in England, with Ivy League universities like Harvard and Yale. But it's also located in this kind of quintessentially American city, the city of Chicago. And that's kind of what makes it so remarkable, honestly, is that from the very beginning it was understood that this very gritty, very industrial, kind of hardscrabble Midwestern city was going to be home to a global university like this one.
And it is definitely that. I mean, you mentioned how many laureates from here?
I always get the numbers wrong. It changes
give me
every
a
couple of
ballpark
years.
then.
Like 102, 103 Nobel laureates from this institution. I think it's the most of any institution in the United States.
I mean, isn't this place just stunningly beautiful? It really is. Look at the campus here. There's so much. I can't believe I've never been here before. I'm embarrassed to say. But Chris, tell me a little bit more about the history of this wonderful spot.
The university is actually located in two Chicago neighborhoods. We're standing right now in what's called Hyde Park, which was established in 1850 by a man named Paul Cornell, and quickly became kind of one of the Tony neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago, all of them located along the lakefront. And then the rest of the campus, or most of the rest of the campus, is located just to the south of us, south of what's called the Midway Plaisance in the Woodlawn neighborhood. Hyde Park is kind of like a wealthy getaway neighborhood. It's a suburb of Chicago, and it accesses the main city by the Metro Electric now, which then was the Illinois Central Railroad, which is the gateway of the Great Migration to the city of Chicago, actually. And then the Woodlawn neighborhood is a much more kind of rural, Dutch farmers settle it, also around 1850, but it's much more of a backwater. And then this whole area kind of explodes with two kind of related phenomena. One, the Great Chicago Fire, which drives people out of Chicago's downtown, and they begin looking for places where they can build a little bit more affordably, away from the strict building codes that follow the fire in Chicago. So the South Side experiences kind of a building boom, particularly in the 1880s. And then there's the announcement of the World's Fair, which is going to happen in Jackson Park and on the Midway Plaisance, which surround our campus. And that leads to not only the Hyde Park neighborhood kind of jumping up in value, but also leads to the explosion of the Woodlawn neighborhood, especially as kind of like an entertainment corridor along 63rd Street. All of that is going on, and all of that is being built while this institution is also rising up.
It's incredible.
With indigenous money, so there's a lot of money that comes out of Chicago. If you look at the names on the buildings around the quad, it's kind of the who's who of Chicago, name and industry in Chicago in the days. You've got steel people, lumber people, grain people,
meatpacking.
Yeah, meatpacking for sure. A lot of meatpacking money in the University of Chicago. You've got all that going on here, but then you've also got money coming in from New York industrialist John D. Rockefeller, who's kind of the most eligible Baptist bachelor. He's married, but he's the most eligible Baptist donor in the United States at the time. Everybody wants him to be part of their project, and he agrees to step in and endow a Baptist college and also major research university here in Hyde Park, which is conceived from the beginning, again, by all these industrialists who are also putting money into it from the city, as a university that is in the city of Chicago, for the city of Chicago, with a mission, Latin mission, vita crescat scientia vita excolatur is the Latin motto of this institution. Let knowledge grow so that life be enriched. And that's kind of this vision, that it's not just a university of Chicago, it is the university for Chicago. And the idea is that it's going to kind of flow out from here and spread a vision, a rational vision of kind of what a good life looks like and what a more beautiful and more humane city can be like.
So one thing you'll notice about the quad here is all the buildings have a specific kind of doorway, and that's all by design. Chris, tell me a little bit more about the doors on campus here.
If you look around this space, you can see that we're in, again, the main quadrangles of the university. The university is actually structured around 7 quads. This one is the central quadrangle, and then there are 3 to the south of us and 3 to the north of us, and those are kind of divided up according to disciplinary areas in the original plan, which is done by a man named Henry Ives Cobb. So when Cobb designs the quadrangles in 1890, the idea is that this is mostly enclosed from the surrounding city. And all the streets around us, now they're part of the university, but when the university is established, these are just neighborhood streets. They're newly Chicago streets, but they'd been suburban streets in the kind of the very bustling and prosperous village of Hyde Park. So Cobb's original vision has all the doors for the buildings, the fronts of the buildings all open inward on the quad. But by 1900, the university has kind of grown to such a place and has such a prominent role in the city of Chicago that the new architects who were brought in to continue Cobb's work, they start putting all the doors on the outsides of the buildings. So the facing doors face outward away from the quadrangles. The idea being that they're inviting and they want people to kind of move in and out of the quads. In fact, there's an illustration of that kind of along this eastern bank of the quad. At one point, this was supposed to be closed in. There was to be a gate here, and there was going to be a museum and a gymnasium, and that was going to kind of complete the walled-in, kind of cloistered nature of this quadrangle. But instead, by 1900, they've decided to leave this open to the city. And even though this land was sort of pulled out of the city grid when it became the University of Chicago, they leave these pedestrian ways that perfectly mirror and echo the city grid. This is Greenwood, and this is 58th Street. So even though it's a pedestrian pathway and it's sort of a private space, it continues the flow and the movement in and out of the city, because that was kind of the understanding of this place and what it was meant to be in and as a part of the city of Chicago.
And a stunning place. When you walk through here, you hear the bells chiming from the aforementioned Rockefeller namesake. And there's all these different kinds of architecture on this campus. You have stuff that is very, you use what's the word that you use for the buildings that are the concrete facing buildings?
Yeah, we've got, all around us is, you see a lot of what's called University Gothic, which is sort of a reminiscent of, although with some variations on kind of traditional English university architecture. And there's really sort of 2 stages of University Gothic that are present just on the old campus, which is where we are. As you move, for example, through that gate, you see a brutalist building, which is sort of a more institutional style of architecture that becomes popular in the United States and also in Europe at the mid-century of the 20th century. And yet, a lot of the architecture that surrounds our quad, as a lot of the architecture in Chicago more generally, is postmodern. So you have architects who are playing on the styles of the buildings that are adjacent to a new structure and trying to sort of playfully reference the architectural forms. So that building, even though it's brutalist, is really picking up on some of the modernism that was very popular in Chicago at the time that it was built in the late 60s, early 1970s. And also is playing on some of the other buildings that are around it on our campus, some of which were thrown up in maybe a more utilitarian era when we were a little more concerned about getting a building built and getting those Manhattan Project experiments done, as opposed to really playing on or thinking about the niceties of our architecture.
Did you know that this is the true origins of the monsters of the Midway that the Chicago Bears use? Happen right here on this particular campus. Chris, tell us all about it.
The land we're standing on is donated by Marshall Field. He donates these 10 acres, and then he donates another piece of land that is just to the north of us. That's the site of Marshall Field, which is the university's original football field. The University of Chicago is one of the founding members of the Big Ten.
Unbelievable.
Our founding president felt that having an intercollegiate football program would kind of bring Chicagoans to the campus and help to build connections between the city and the young university. And he was absolutely right. As the university's football program became better and better, and we won 5 national championships in our first 15 years, as the university's football team becomes more and more renowned, we become known as the Monsters of the Midway. That's where the Bears get the name.
Come
because
on.
we used to practice
Really?
on the Midway Plaisance, which is just to the south of where we're standing right now. So they practice on the Midway, and over 80,000 people would come down here for games on the weekends, which if you think about it, in an era before cars, that was a big commitment. You've got people coming down here on the L, they're coming down here on the train, they're staying, they're spending money. It really endeared this institution to, and really made it connect to the city of Chicago. And in those days, the enrollment in the undergraduate college here is very, very heavily focused on Chicago young people. That begins to change as the university's stature becomes more elevated, it becomes more selective, they institute some curricular reforms, and we have a president who in the 1930s really begins to conceive of the university more as this kind of elite institution that has more of a global following and a global reach. And as he kind of elevates the standards of the university, he becomes a little bit more suspicious of what he sort of derisively refers to in a letter as the local forms of animal life, meaning the local Chicagoans. And he begins to make some changes that kind of, let's say they don't endear the university to its neighbors. One of those changes that he makes is the cancellation of the football program, which means that by the 1940s, when the US government needs a bunch of trained physicists to do some very, very, very secret experiments in a very secret place that nobody's going to go, well, the big abandoned neo-Gothic football stadium that's, just south of your major research university is the perfect place to do it. And so they start doing these experiments under the squash courts, which are under the bleachers of the old football stadium.
And now there is a brutalist.
And now there's a brutalist library with a Helmut Jahn building right next to it that tends to be the headquarters of global villains in sort of dystopian sci-fi films. If you watch the Divergent movies, I forget the name of the faction, but the faction that's secretly running everything, they all operate out of the library of the University of Chicago.
Like I said, look at the beautiful buildings here on campus, and there are some world-renowned architects that have buildings that have built on this particular campus. Chris, tell us about them.
There's the Roby House,
Yes.
is a Frank Lloyd Wright. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's just a few blocks that way. That was just in the neighborhood. The architecture that's here, this kind of collegiate Gothic, inspires collegiate Gothic all around the country. Just the way, really, that the sort of the neoclassical architecture of the World's Fair buildings, just down the block from here, also inspired. In fact, there's the alma mater of this institution talks about the relationship between the White City, which is the World's Fair campus of 1893, this kind of ephemeral place that sprang up and then disappeared, and the ways that relates to the more enduring Gray City, which is the University of Chicago, where we think a little bit more about how do you make a vision of a city beautiful, how do you make that happen in a real city?
Right.
And that's this place. But then you've got people, I forget the name, Pignoli did one of the buildings on campus. Eero Saarinen, who did Dulles Airport in New York, he does a campus master plan for us. He builds our law school. Mies van der Rohe, the father of kind of Chicago modernism, sort of a new wave Chicago modernism, I guess you could say, at the mid-century. He does our Crown Center, which is our social work building.
And you
Just an
have
incredible group
Judy
of
Gang,
architects.
right?
Yeah, and in our newest campus building, Jeannie Gang did a dormitory building for us with Studio Gang, as well as HKO does the new conference center building that's over. IMP and Harry Weiss were both very involved, again, kind of key figures in modernist architecture. They're involved in building in the neighborhood around us. So kind of a remarkable architectural canvas as well.
All right, there's a fun story about the velvet ropes on campus when you see a symbol on the floor. Chris, tell me all about it.
If you go into our student union building, the Reynolds Club, you will see embedded into the floor the seal of the university, which has that Latin motto that I quoted a little bit earlier, Crescat Scientia Vita Excolatur, and then below it the seal of the University of Chicago, which has the phoenix rising from the ashes, which of course is a reference not to this institute, well, it's a dual reference actually. So this is the second University of Chicago. The first was a much smaller kind of Baptist denominational college that was founded about 2.5 miles north of here with a donation from Stephen A. Douglas, the famous sort of Democratic senator who was on the wrong side of the slavery debate with Abraham Lincoln. So Douglas endows that Baptist university, which falls apart shortly after his death. It's financially poorly managed, and it's collapsed by sort of the 1880s. But the Baptists tried again, and sort of out of the ashes of that first defeat, they build a new institution that arises greater than the one that preceded it. But of course, that's also the story of the city of Chicago, which burns in 1871, and then rebuilds itself, as this kind of global city. Again, the phoenix arising from the ashes. So there's that kind of dual reference. And Phil the Phoenix is still our mascot. So.
All right, Chris, tell me about the significance of the Midway Plaisance and this university.
If you were to proceed through Harper Memorial Library, which is just to the south of us, out sort of what is in some ways imagined as kind of the front door of the university, it opens onto this absolutely incredible and very historic landscape that was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux in 1869. Olmsted and Vaux, who were fresh from doing Central Park at the time, they instituted a system of parks that was to be sort of the Grand South Park as part of the larger sort of boulevard-laced Chicago park system that was conceived in the middle of the 19th century. A lot of that plan wasn't executed because of the Great Chicago Fire, but they come back to it when we need a campus for the World's Fair of 1893. And so all of that kind of gets built and improved upon, developed for the fair, and then redeveloped into parkland afterwards. But then the Olmsteds, while they're doing that project, they are also actually on campus. By this time, it's Olmsted's son and his nephew, whom he had also adopted and to whom he had given his name as Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. They actually come in and they do the campus landscape plan in 1901 and 1902. So the harmony that exists between this landscape and the landscapes that are around it, it's literally familial.
Remember when I was talking about the Midway Plaisance and the canal system that would have been? Well, take a look at what it was. This is the canal system right up to the shores of the Museum of Science and Industry, one of the only buildings left from the World's Fair of 1893. That's why that staircase is so grand and so beautiful that you're seeing right there. It goes right up into the palace of what have been the fine arts during the World's Fair. And another great aspect of this particular spot in Hyde Park is that across the way where I'm walking right now, I'm gonna flip the camera around, this is a field full of cherry blossoms. So if you come out here in April, early April, you can see the cherry blossoms, or you come out here now and you see the leaves change into this beautiful, picturesque cityscape that is Hyde Park.
You have two generations of this same kind of the epitome of kind of American landscape architecture. They're all working in this space, and they're thinking about this space and other spaces around the city, which is also true when you look at the architecture that's here. The architects who were here, Henry Ives Cobb, who does the original plan. Cobb does buildings like the Chicago Athletic Club downtown, that's right on Grant Park. You've got Shepley, Rutan, and Coolidge, who do the Harper Library and do the Mitchell Tower and the Tower Group, the Reynolds Club. They also do the Art Institute building, and they do what's now the Chicago Cultural Center, which is built as the original home of the Chicago Public Library. Man. So all of these people, they're very Chicago people. Even if their firms weren't always based there, they were doing a lot of work in Chicago. And you have, in some cases, like the Art Institute, it's the president of the Art Institute who is on the board of directors, the board of trustees of the Young University of Chicago, who gets the architects who built the Art Institute building and brings them to this campus because he's involved in both spaces. And again, it all just kind of speaks to this kind of tightly woven almost tapestry of connections that bind this institution to a lot of other institutions around the city of Chicago.
And as you walk through campus, you hear music playing from a chapel. There's a whole story behind it. Chris explains.
Our university chapel has a dean, the dean of Rockefeller Chapel, but a secondary and very important role in the chapel is that of the master carillonneur, the person who's in charge of the bell tower with its 2,500 or so bells.
That's amazing.
It's not digital, those are real bells, and they're played with what's essentially an organ console. And students who are keyboardists can apply to join the team of student carillonneurs, and it's students who give concerts every day. Like I said, always at midday, and I believe it's also at 6 p.m. as the sun is kind of going down, at least at the good times of the year.
Sure.
And so they also get to pick the music that they play. So you'll hear anything from works by Bach or Schubert, but there's also very contemporary stuff. You'll hear some Scott Joplin every once in a while. I heard the Rainbow Connection the other day. So it's really, really cool. Just kind of the quirky aspects of this place.
So that brutalist building that Chris was talking about that is on the site of where they did the Manhattan Project, the old football stadium here at the University of Chicago, that's it right there. Pretty fun facts all around here in the University of Chicago in the Hyde Park neighborhood. This is For Love of Chicago. Give me a buzz on the email, thomas.barnes@cbs.com, or go to our website or YouTube channel and check out the other ones I've done. There's a lot of great stories about our beautiful city that is Chicago.